Well, my review of the new Pro Controller thing released by ThrustMaster has taken a little bit longer than what I would thought because it wasn't quite so straightforward. And I'm going to be touching on a bunch of different things in relation to this controller. The first thing I'm going to address is you don't actually need the full top-of-the-line controller, and I didn't know this. If you have a look on the website, there's a whole bunch of cheaper versions of the controller, which you can then go ahead and buy the parts you want, including just this. And you know what? I am going to suggest that that's actually probably a pretty good route for this. But out of all of the places to have it, and I have tried it in all of the different places, including this one, but this seems to be the best place for it. I'm also left-handed, so that works mostly for me. I reckon if you're right-handed and you wanted to try driving it with your right hand, you probably don't want it here. You'd probably want it up here. Just the extension of the finger. Usually I'm finding myself holding the far side of the wheel, which would be a little bit harder over here. But just a little bit harder. Next, we're going to move on to the general ergonomics of this. To base it as just a normal controller, I think it's, passable. It feels nice in the hand, though you can't get over that it is cheap material. I don't know if you can hear that. Here it is close to the microphone. So, don't expect really high quality for really high price. I don't understand that one. And now we're going to move on to the part which I was most looking forward to, which is the nuance that you can gain from a wheel like this. When driving this, you're not going to find yourself becoming a complete master of driving. This is still going to be very much a controller experience, especially considering you only get 90 degrees of rotation out of this thing, which, in my opinion, is just not enough. But for a step up from a regular controller, this is actually pretty decent. Now, there is a little bit of a problem. If you are doing the controlling on the far side, which I found even my partner did, you are it takes a little bit to get used to because your finger is going to be touching the inside part, which is moving at a different RPM, kind of like traveling a different distance than the outside. So it's like it takes a little bit to get used to knowing how much you're actually steering. Oh dear, I've gone off again. But, unlike a normal controller with a stick, I find that I can grab drifts a lot easier, or just sudden going sideways. This is why I've picked a particularly hard vehicle to control and haven't got any ESC on, is just to kind of show that it's a little bit easier to grab with just a little bit more nuance. Now, if this thing had force feedback, oh my god, it would just be the absolute bee's knees, to be honest. But, it's only 300 and something Australian dollars. The price is a bit ridiculous for what it is. But it is the only one of its kind, so you kind of cornered on the market. At least the module itself is quite cheap. And now we're getting into drifting, which is something which is quite tricky to do in most games with a controller that don't have a whole bunch of assists, and I have no assists on for this, by the way. So if you're thinking that you're much better at controlling the game than I am, well, I mean, maybe you have assists on. Potentially, if you are just better than me, then that's fine. This controller may not be for you anyway. But for people like me that, aren't sweaty, really high quality gamers, this becomes a lot easier to control. Maybe I should go full sweat mode and not talk whilst I show a few examples of good drifting in this. Well, there you go. You get the idea. As a way to just get more control than a regular controller, this sits kind of, how do I... Imagine a scale of 1 to 10. A controller for controllability I find with a normal stick, which I have tried to compare the two, would probably sit at about a 3 out of 10. Whereas a G29 sim rig from Logitech or something like that would probably sit somewhere around a 6 or a 7 compared to real life, which should be 10. This kind of sits like a 4 to a 5? It's like better than a controller, but not as good as a sim rig by far, basically. So if you have a controller already and all you need to do is pay the $29.99, well, this is actually a very good proposition. But if you're gonna go out and buy the big controller, definitely not worth it. This thing is way too cheap and nasty. I cannot suggest paying a lot of money for this. So instead, this one. I mean, it looks like it replaces the correct one anyway, so just pay less. Get this one. Talking of hot swappability, you've got these like replaceable sides. I don't know if I brought that up before. That just seems like a failure point in the future. But for now, it seems okay enough, I suppose. Here's one concern though that somebody had brought up with me, and the fact that this doesn't have as many options as a normal unit. If we have a look at your regular type of joystick, you're gonna have not just a side-to-side movement, but also an up and down, but you're also going to have a push button, which actually, in some games, you can use quite a lot. And this just has the one axis, not any other axis, and not an up and down button. But I don't feel that that is a massive loss for a controller like this. There are actually a few different benefits you have to this. In one, you have reprogrammable options, so you can have different layouts if you want, which is a step up from a normal controller. But you also have extra buttons on the back here, which are also fairly useful. I personally haven't bothered to use them yet, though, because you don't really need that many buttons for BeamNG. For those of you that are also a little bit concerned about these sorts of things, this is, hold on, let's go back into BeamNG and see, we're controlling it now. I'm going to pull this out, I'm going to stick this in, and there, it's already working. So completely hot swappable. But I'm just gonna get rid of you and never use you and put that back in. But here's the big thing about this. Let's say, for instance, you're driving in BeamNG and, oh no, I've hit a wall. And now my steering is just a little bit messed up. Driving with a stick can actually be really difficult. So you can see here we're pulling a little bit to the left. I actually have so much more nuanced control now that this is actually doable to drive with a controller with a damaged car. Previously, you just have to do like lots and lots of little stabs at the steering joystick, to get this to work just right. But for this one, I mean, if I'm paying attention, which I'm apparently not paying enough attention because I'm also recording, it works pretty darn well. And I can even drift with a damaged vehicle, which is something that I would have never thought possible in BeamNG with a controller. I mean, it's still going to be problematic, as you can see, but it is so much more controllable than with a stick. Now, I mostly only do BeamNG, but I do have other games like Assetto Corsa. And here's something which is usually quite difficult to do, is it just works out of the box with games. Not everything can do that, and that is severely underestimated as a thing when it comes to a lot of racing games, especially older ones like Assetto Corsa, where if I want to get my Logitech G920 to work, there is so many hoops you can have to jump through. Project Cars sometimes will just be like, you know what, we're done with Logitech and we're never going to work ever again. But not only that, I can actually drive this with a controller. Now, would I want to do this over a sim rig? No, I am nowhere near as good. But unlike driving with a stick, this is actually a lot more controllable and just, you know, a bunch of fun. Now, they're all going to pull away from me because I just don't have a lot of experience in Assetto Corsa. This is not really my game of choice, to be honest. But this is a little bit of fun, just cruising around in an old car that I wouldn't be able to, without having to bring out my rig and set that all up, which is a real hassle. This is just fun. And that's what games should be sometimes. So, I'm gonna say, for Assetto Corsa, as long as you're not trying to be competitive, this is pretty darn good. Lots of lockups there. I can even do a little bit of a drift. I don't have the skill in this game that it seems that the AI does. Oh dear. There we go. And I can control drifts, all that sort of stuff, which is normally just not really possible in with a normal controller. So, my overall thoughts about this controller. Well, don't buy the Pro. The Pro is, like, just not worth it, even slightly, unless you really need all the extra bits and bobs. As just a normal controller, if you're just doing BeamNG and maybe a few other games where it doesn't matter overly much in competitiveness, this module here, just alone, 30 American dollars, totally worth it. My partner rated this God tier controller. My partner is not into racing games at all. She will occasionally try out a few little experiences that I set up for her, say VR and Euro Trucking Simulator or something like that. But when I gave her this, she went from being like completely uninterested in BeamNG to being like, wow, this is something to really use. And she was saying God tier. Now, personally, would I call it God tier? No. But I would say that it is much better than a normal joystick. And personally, I am not going to be using this anymore. I am going to be using this. It is just that little bit better. And if you're looking for just a little bit more control, somewhere that sits between this and a full sim rig like this back here, this is pretty much it. So I'm going to say yes, buy. Do buy. It is a lot easier controlling if you got a vehicle that is actually not particularly hard to control in the first place. All-wheel drive, you know, lots of power, front engine. It's just going to be a lot better. I would like to thank, though, my channel members for helping support these endeavors and to make it affordable for me to be able to buy these controllers and bring these reviews to you. Driving and talking at the same time, not my strongest point. For the rest of you, though, I'll catch you all next time. Goodbye.